Welcome, welcome everyone. I am so happy to see your faces. I'm always happy to see you every Wednesday, but particularly today. I'm Sherry Reichert-Ballou, author of Say It Now, 33 Creative Ways to Say I Love You to the most important people in your life. And very, very, very pleased and honored to have Dawna and Will here with us today. Thank you both. And thank you to everyone else who's here on this particularly upside down kind of day in the world. We're going to start. We have a very special beginning today. Dawna, and I think your husband, right? The two of you created this?
Yeah, Andy Briner.
They created a video. Do you want to introduce it at all, Dawna?
Well, we call it a musing because it's his music and it's poems that are coming through me since I've been quarantined. So actually for the last 10 months. And then we put them together into what we call a musing. And it's just, it's a way of my integrating my internal world with the external world and not disappearing completely from the external world, and a way of giving and bringing a little bit more beauty into the world. That's all I have to say.
Yeah. So thank you for suggesting that we start with that. And I think Debbie's going to cue us up and let us watch this beautiful piece.
Can you put it on full view? Yeah.
Now, in this moment when shade gives way to light, when the wonder of feeling alive outshines the pain of breaking open. Now, as the world awaits the light only your loving can bring. Now, may you allow your breath to kindle the embers of your wildest dreams, holding nothing back.
Wondering if we could watch that again. Would that be okay with everybody?
Sure.
I have to tell Marlena something. The music that Andy composed, Marlena and I did an interview, a conversation together on one of these technological things, and Andy listened in. And at the end, he went to his piano and he said, "I love that woman." And meaning you, not me, but me as well. I know that's the case. And he composed that music. So it's his Marlena music. So it's perfect that you're here today.
Dawna, thank you for that. Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
So the music is a random act of kindness.
Yeah, let's watch it again.
Okay.
This moment when shade gives way to light. When the wonder of feeling alive outshines the pain of breaking open. Now, as the world awaits the light only your loving can bring. Now, may you allow your breath to kindle the embers of your wildest dreams, holding nothing back.
Thank you, Debbie.
So beautiful.
Yeah, I miss Andy's music.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you
Donna,
didn't miss it that time.
he's not here, but will you please give him a big hug for
I
us?
will. I will.
And thank you, Donna, for suggesting that we start that way. I don't know. I suspect other people felt like I did, like, you know, I just felt like that was such a beautiful moment. And Donna, let's just start with you with now. And if you would just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about where you are right now.
I'm home where those photographs were taken, which is on Maui in the middle of the Pacific. My mental emotional state is what I call defensive pessimism, that I've been for the last however many hours. And I woke up in that state, kind of in this. I know the state well. Anybody who has had cancer, and I've had it 5 times, and you're waiting for biopsy results, that's the kind of the same sense in my body I have now with what's going on with the election and the politics and all of that defensive pessimism. And what I asked myself and where this came from, since I've been feeling it for at least the last week anyway, was, so what's the medicine? What's the medicine? And what came every time I waited for biopsy results, where I always come to, fortunately, is that what I need is a sense of agency. You know, some kind of sense that the agency is like salve or a balm, you know, that there's something I can do, that I can in some way create connection or some kind of a difference in the world. So what I did this morning, what I did yesterday morning, is I went to my neighbor's, and she has a dog who's always alone in the morning and barking, and I just threw in some dog biscuits. And when I went, what I did this morning was I went down to our local market, and my favorite random act of kindness, or at least my most useful one, is I know one of the cashiers and she sees me, and I pay for the person who's behind me in the line. She just includes it in my my food bill, and they get their food paid for, and then I leave. And the part about random acts of kindness that's always been so important to me is the random part, and the fact that it's a verb, not a noun. So I can't be seen doing it. That ruins it for me. But the fact that I know, or I wait outside till the person comes out, they have no idea who I am, and I get to get some feedback that I can create a connection without my ego getting involved. You know, anytime I tell myself to be kind, my ego gets involved and say, yeah, well, remember when you didn't feed the cat. But when it's a doing, I have a sense of agency, because there's so much we can't do anything about. So this time is kind of like a cancer, and dealing with a biopsy for a cancer, and all of that has been really helpful to me, and why random acts of kindness and putting it out into the world, which you were such a significant part in making that happen, why that has been my medicine over all these years.
Oh, Donna, wow. I love what you're saying about finding agency in those acts, you know, and the verb part of it. And also, I totally understand and agree that part of when it's truly random and how we keep our ego out. I would love for you, just in case, I know probably most people here know who you are, but just in case they don't, would you just give us a quick introduction to yourself and your work?
Just a quick, I'm 78. You can't do anything quickly when you're 78 anymore.
Take all the time you want then.
Except maybe go speechless. So let me go speechless for a moment and enjoy that. I do a lot of pottery now on our, what's called the lanai, which is an open porch where we live. Because everything I never learned from a therapist that I wanted to, or from a religious guide, clay is teaching me about releasing and about finding center and about relating and everything I needed. That clay is teaching me. In the past, I've been a corporate midwife to CEOs and senior leaders. I've worked as a psychotherapist. I have written, a lot of books have come through me. So I'm like the little old lady who lived in a shoe. So about 18 books have come through me. My last book was called, I'm supposed to show it to you, but here it is, Living a Loved Life, published by Mango. Ta-da! That I wrote as a legacy, because storytelling is the heart of who I am and how I think. And a lot of the stories that I've told, I wanted to leave to my son, who's 50 something years old. And they haven't been publicly out there in any form. So this is dedicated to my son and also to my grandmother, who was a midwife and a healer. And I
the
have been
co-author of your
involved
book.
in the, pardon?
And the co-author of your book.
And the co-author, yes, exactly. Thank you. I can give you that when it's time, my involvement with random acts of kindness and practicing random acts of kindness, and how that came to be. What I can say about it, when you're ready for me to do that, but what I can say about it was that Glennon was the midwife of the movement that has become a movement and is still alive and well in the world. So it's very, and I haven't seen him or talked to him in many years. So it's a gift for me this day. Will Glennon is my gift of doing all of this. So.
Dawna, thank you. And maybe what we'll do is we'll have Will introduce himself, and then can we come back? And I would love to hear your story.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
let's do that. Let's do that. Let's bring Will in, and Will, same thing, if you would give us a little introduction. And also, I just love Dawna's like now, like where are you now?
Yeah.
So let me know if I'm cracking up, because as we've discovered, my internet is intermittently good and intermittently not so good. To sort of riff off of where Dawna started, I am the irrational optimist. And I don't know why that's true, but it's always been true in my life. The world always seems beautiful to me. And when I see problems and trouble, they appear to me to be obstacles that we have to get around to get to the other side where the beauty returns. As for what I'm doing, I think I'm in sort of the best of all places. I'm playing golf 3-4 times a week, which is a religious experience for me. My father died 3 years ago at 99. And I used to play golf with him over 66 years of playing golf with my father. So playing golf is a way for me not just to relax, be centered, be out in the world, but also to be communing with my father. I think of him every time I'm on the course. It's a really wonderful and very relaxing and centering experience. And the other thing that I do is every weekend, I drive 50 miles down to San Jose, and I am the prime caretaker of two adorable 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. And it's an absolute pleasure. They are so adorable. And then I come home Sunday night and I go to bed very early because it's equally exhausting. But the combination is working for me. So I kind of feel almost guilty that as people are going through this COVID shutdown and being shut away from so many good things in their life, it's almost not affecting me. And I apologize to the world for that.
Well, Will, I just want to say, I love what you just said. And I'm so glad that you brought both of those beautiful little children in, but also your dad. And, you know, Dawna had used the word connection, and just hearing those stories that you told, like, I felt the connection. And I personally, this is my own feeling. Is there anything more important than that, you know, than those connections to the people we love? And I love that you started there. Would you also tell us a little about your books and the books that you've edited as well as written, so that people might have that introduction?
The books that I've written are primarily about parenting. One of them was about being a father. It was originally called Fathering, which is not a term that we use very often for interesting reasons. And it was based on interviews with 200 and something different fathers. And I also wrote a book called, now I got to remember the titles, How to Raise a Daughter with Great Self-Esteem, something like that.
Yeah.
And the other one was How to Raise a Son with Emotional Intelligence. But I think probably the ones that have sort of taken charge of my life more than anything else was the Random Acts of Kindness series. And that was, I mean, okay, Dawna, what you said, there they are.
That's two of them.
It was very serendipitous. I mean, the whole Random Acts of Kindness thing just sort of unfolded naturally of its own. And Dawna called me the midwife, which is probably an accurate term because I was not giving birth. I was helping the birth. But it did lead me to found the Kindness Foundation, which still is in existence today. And I was a co-founder of the World Kindness Movement, which is now 22 years old and still active today. So there's a lot of kindness out there in the world that I can feel about.
Well, I lost you slightly at the end of that. Could you just repeat that last sentence?
The last sentence was, there's a lot of kindness in the world that I can feel happy about.
Nice.
And I would like to get, if we can shift into some of the moment issues. Is that okay?
That is okay. Let me just check in quickly and see. I know Dawna was going to share how she got involved. Is this a good time to do that? And then we'll shift back. How would that be, Will? Good. Yeah, let's do that.
I'll connect then and now. So that will set it up for you, Will. I'm going to read something from the first Random Acts of Kindness because it's a context. It was as many years ago as Will said. Seems to me like 100, but it wasn't. However, it was decades ago. And in some ways, nothing has changed. So it begins, our souls are leaking. We are in a recession and we are receding. We are not moving toward anything. We are receding away from what terrifies us, away from not enough, away from chaos, away from poverty, away from random acts of violence, from drive-by shootings and child abuse and homelessness and disease. At that time, it was AIDS and drug wars. We are both clutching each other and moving away at the same time. this little book you hold is more needed than ever. So that was the big context in which Random Acts of Kindness, the books of Random Acts of Kindness and Practicing Random Acts of Kindness were published. That was the time. And for me, as people that know me know that my grandmother was one of the most significant influences in my life. She was a midwife and a healer, and every Friday I would go to her house and spend the day with her, and she would teach me what she knew. And one of the things she taught me when I asked her about why there was so much, my father used to scream and yell and beat my mother, la, 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 and why all that happened, is she would say, she lived in a place called Hell's Kitchen, which is the name of that, it's in New York. She would say, because people haven't learned, and she didn't, her English was very confused, but she would say, because people give from their head wanting something back, they want to take. They have to learn about giving from their hearts, because that's the medicine for who we are as a people. She wouldn't have used that language, as a people. And so that was confusing to me, because in my house where I grew up with my parents, giving was like an accountant. Well, you gave me this, so I give you this. And my sister drew a line in lipstick down our bedroom, and that's your half, and you took mine, so I take yours. Everything in my life growing up was that I did this and you did this. And fast forward to through many of my experiences with cancering, when my body was cancering, and I went and heard Maya Angelou give a speech in Rhode Island. And she used the phrase, I have never forgotten to say thank you for those random acts of kindness. And afterwards I went up and I waited for a long time. I was so blown away with what she said. And I waited for a long time to get to thank her and ask her what she meant by practicing random acts of kindness, because it sounded like my grandmother. And she told me about this woman in California who would use that phrase and who would pay for the people behind her in a toll booth. And that whole idea, just because I think it rang from what my grandmother told me. And at the time I was training psychotherapists and social workers and people who were in the healing professions at some level. And the idea captivated me. So I asked people to tell stories, because that's my native language, about someone who had practiced a random act of kindness on them or with them or for them. And the random part was really important, because then you get to have a cellular experience of what kindness really is and what it can do. It's a verb. It doesn't become a noun, another thing we can put on an accountant's ledger. So people just lit up. I couldn't get them to shut up. There were 30, 40 people in the room, and they just started telling one story after another after another. And then I asked them to write stories about a random act of kindness that they had practiced at some time in their life. And everybody just kind of went, there were like suddenly the energy totally changed, and there was no material. And I said, this will not do. This will not do. So I gave them a homework exercise of going out and practicing random acts of kindness. And the result, they came back the next month, and it was just much more much more effusive, much more, and talking about how not having it known who they were helped them understand really what soul was about, what heart was about, what connection was about. And then we also trained people in Madison, Wisconsin, and in California. So when we went to Madison, we did the same thing, same response. Went to California, the same response. Well, anything you get the same response from East Coast, Midwest, and West Coast, that was a yes for me. So I was riding in the car with one of my two publishers, Will at the time for Canary Press and Mary Jane Ryan. And I was writing in the car with Mary Jane Ryan. And I said, I think we should do a book that's just elicits stories of random acts of kindness. And she said, oh, Will would never go for this. It won't make any money. And you don't have any time because you're writing this other book, No Enemies Within, which has probably sold 11 copies in its life. I said, well, I can do both. I can do both. And she said, well, okay, so put it together and I'll talk to Will about it. And then I did. I just collected stories and I asked for stories and I put together a few, maybe 10. I don't know how many there were. And I sent them to Mary Jane. And I think my mother was dying at the time or something big was happening in my life. And then I got a phone call and she said, you won't believe this. And I said, what? She said, Will loves the idea and he wants to do it. And it was so illogical financially because we had no idea that there was any market or anybody would want to be involved in this. So that's how I heard about the woman in California. I read more about her. Then Oprah picked it up and then people started calling it passing it forward. Or I don't know, there were all kinds of other names and riffs and Will knows more about that than me. But that's my involvement, how I got involved. And I was always committed to kids. So I got very involved in doing one for kids called the Kids Random Acts of Kindness. There, I'm holding that one up. And then Will and Mary Jane put out more random acts of kindness. And then I'm sure there are ones about dogs and fish and elephants and not politicians, but so that's how I came to my medicine. And that's how I got involved with practicing random acts of kindness.
Dawna, thank you for sharing. I know I've only met you a few times, but I'm so struck by what feels to me like this deep listening that you do. You know, but your stories to me always elicit like this way that you have of tapping into wisdom around you and also just wisdom coming through you, wisdom in you, all around you. And I so appreciate that.
And, a woman on the chat just said the woman was in Berkeley and her name, Will, was Ann Herbert. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, good. Good. Yeah.
Thank you, Dawna. So Will, shall we come back? I know you had some thoughts that you wanted to.
Yeah, I wanted to actually shift to the now, meaning the now. We're all sitting here the day after Election Day, and it looks like 2020 is not through with us. So the question that keeps coming to mind, actually there's a couple keep coming to mind. One of them is, why is 2020 doing this to us? And I think there is an answer that resonates with my sort of natural position of irrational optimism. And that is, as Dr. Martin Luther King said, the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. And any historian will tell you that's absolutely true. When we hear that phrase, we imagine this beautiful, smooth arc bending towards justice, but it doesn't work that way. When you home in on that arc, it's very jagged. Because to move forward, you have to confront the ugliness and the mistakes and the errors that are stopping you from moving forward. You can't just leap over them. You can't just forget them. Which means that history bends towards justice, but it does so in a very zigzaggy way that at times can be overwhelming and depressing. How did we, nice people that we are, elect Donald? That's not the biggest question. The biggest question is, why are so many of us still voting for Donald Trump? And, you know, this group here is, I think, fairly homogenous in the sense that I don't think there's any Trump voters out there. So the question that I keep thinking of is, yeah, the first question is, how does anybody vote for this guy? I mean, really? But the problem is, I know people who voted for him. Not only do I know people, but there is one particular gentleman, and I'm sure we all have someone like this in our lives. This one man is a man that I mentored in the kindness movement. They brought him into the kindness movement to become a leader. And a year ago, he got married, second time in his life, had a new baby, and went straight down the rabbit hole. And I was unable to do anything about it. And he is now full-on fledged QAnon crazy man. And I look at this and I say, okay, how can this happen? How can this happen? This was an intelligent, rational man who was committed to kindness. What it says to me is that kindness is more important now than it has ever been, than it was when we first started publishing these books, because we are so divided. We are so torn apart. And yes, there are reasons for it. We can blame Fox News. We can blame the president. We can blame all kinds of people. But the truth is, half of this country hates the other half of this country. And there's no way that we can subsist that way. We can't. And the ones who are going to have to make the effort are the ones who can find it in their heart to actually reach out and talk to people who we disagree with, talk to people who may be angry at us, talk to people who may think that we're evil incarnate. Let them see enough of who we are, enough of our heart, that they'd stop thinking of us as evil incarnate and maybe start to listen a little bit. It has to happen. And today is a good day to start doing it.
Will, I have a question for you. Because you said that we're not through with 2020. Or you said 2020 isn't through with us.
Right.
And so my question, my belief is that we're not through with 2020 either. It's not just, and I always am coming from looking for agency. So the story, what in the world made you say yes to publishing this little book? And how in the world did you take it from that with Mary Jane to become, and then by yourself, to become a movement? That story is a medicine story, because it will help us when we want to spread, when we want to have our agency with 2020, it'll help us have some glimmer of light in terms of how to do it. But why in the world did you say yes? There was no possibility it was going to make a lot of money. We donated, I forget how much of the percentage of any books that were sold to charitable organizations, to the AIDS Foundation and other places. Why did you say yes? And then how did you do that?
Well, I don't think I ever didn't say yes. It just, there was never a place to say no. I mean, the stories, one of the things that happened early on, the time this was all taking place, we were changing the of Canary Press. We were growing at the time. We were going from a very small office to a larger office. And when we got to the new office, we decided to have a office party. So we invited everybody, the UPS guy, the mail, I mean, anything think of who had anything to do with us, we'd ever talked to, we invited. And as an afterthought, because it was on our minds, we said, and if you have any stories, acts of kindness that you've done or that has happened to you in your life, bring them, because we'd like to hear them. So when that party took place, first of all, we had a turnout that we couldn't believe. I mean, it was just, we had to go back to the store for a lot more alcohol, let's put it that way. But people started coming up and telling their stories, and it's everything was wonderful and inspiring. And I did one of the same things that you were alluding to earlier, which is about halfway through this parade of people telling stories, noticed that everyone was telling stories about kindnesses that had happened to them. And I said, well, I'm sure, you're all very kind people. All we're hearing is all these wonderful things that happen to you. What about things you've done? Dead silence. It was, okay. And then people just started coming back up and telling more stories about what had happened to them. And it was so powerful that the commercial issue didn't matter. It was like these were stories that had to get out. And since you're all in publishing, I will tell you there was a time in publishing when you could publish things that needed to get out without having to worry about whether you were going to make money. That pretty much is no longer true, which is one of the reasons I got out of publishing. But at the time, we had the freedom to say, hey, if we lose money on this, it's not a big deal. We'll make it up somewhere else. These stories have to get out. What happened from there was it really took on a life of its own. We got probably, I would say after about the first month that the first book was, the US Post Office started delivering our mail in multiple sacks. We used to get a nice, pile of mail. All of a sudden, we're getting 4 or 5 sacks of mail. And the person whose responsibility it was to go through the mail getting frustrated because it was all from people who were responding to the book Random Acts of Kindness. Now, one of the things that we had done, and Dawna, if you look on the back cover of the original book, it says Kindness Revolution. Mm-hmm. And I put that on the back cover because I was nervous. What I thought was if people would open the book and read just one, they'd buy it because they're so amazing. But how is I going to get people to open the book? Random Acts of Kindness just sounds kind of weird. It's like a riff on Random Acts of Violence.
Oh, we lost you,
Will.
We lost you, Will. Come back to us. We'll wait.
He's frozen in time.
He is frozen. Ah, I was riveted. Dawna, do you have a sense of where he was going with the kindness revolution?
I don't. I would never say I have any idea where Will is going. However, what came to me was the parts that we used to fight about was I wanted practice Random Acts of Kindness in the title. And they said, we can't do that because that was Ann Herbert's phrase. I said, yeah, but that's what it's about. It's not something that just happens to you. It's a practice. And that's what will make it contagious. Because we wanted to know about, since AIDS was all around the same way that COVID is all around, we wanted to create a contagion, a positive contagion. So the practice Random Acts of Kindness, and now, given what he was talking about, the politics of now, is, to me, is the antidote to this sense that I was talking about of loss of agency or defensive pessimism. It doesn't take very much. If you go do it today, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And I think that is why it has continued. It's become a verb, not a noun. When kindness is a noun, it's an object, and people lose their sense of agency. But when it's a verb, when it's something you do, it's an act of kindness that you practice. and that you practice anonymously, that's when the magic happens. And that's why these stories started pouring in and pouring in and pouring in. So he may totally disagree with my having said that, but he can't talk now.
He
So
can't.
for once I get a chance to speak for him.
Well, and I love, yeah, what you did, which was just to bring it back to what you see about it. And I appreciate that. And Marlena, did you want to jump in? And it looks like we got Will back too.
Oh, good.
Oh, that's good. I have to leave a little early today, so I wanted to make sure to thank Dawna and Will, both of you, and of course you, Sherry, as well. This was so meaningful and so perfect for today. And I love the trilogy of agency, of kindness, but also what Will said, confronting the ugliness. Those three pillars are so powerful. And I just really want to thank you for bringing those to us today. And of course, it's always, always so good to see you, Dawna.
Yeah.
So I got to go, but it's just wonderful. And thank you. And Sherry, thanks for your wonderful job as always.
It's good to see you, Marlena. We'll see you again.
Yeah.
Will, we lost you, I think, just a paragraph or two behind. I don't know if you remember where you were.
Yeah,
There you are.
that was 2020 speaking, by the way. The point I was trying to make was that we had to separate the whole world of kindness from Canary Press just in order to salvage Canary Press, because we were being overwhelmed by kindness people. That was the founding of the Random Acts of Kindness Foundation. So the Random Acts of Kindness Foundation still exists. It's operating out of Denver. Just to finish the history of this, I got a letter about a year after Random Acts of Kindness from a very dear man in Japan, Dr. Mori, who was once the president of Tokyo University. And he said, I'm the head of a small kindness movement in Japan. And I've heard all about Random Acts of Kindness. Can you come to Japan and we can talk? So I did, and we did, and the World Kindness Movement grew out of that. So it's all been very serendipitous, but also extremely important, extremely important.
It's a positive contagion.
That's right, it's a virus.
I'd love to see if anyone else who's here wants to jump in and ask Will or Dawna anything or share your thoughts. Rachel?
Hi, well, thank you both so much for being here and talking about I mean, it's a perfect timing for this conversation, and it's so important. And Will, you were saying, it's important to reach out to the people that don't understand our point of view. And one of the things that I always do throughout all this stuff is I always look at both sides from their side. I've learned to do that in religion. I've learned to do that in every single act that I don't understand. I look at it from that perspective side. I do not look at it from the side I understand, because otherwise it will continue to make no sense to me. And for me, it has helped me communicate with people in a loving way and stay in a place where I'm not judging them. I can ask them questions where they don't feel defensive.
Right.
And it's such a big deal to have somebody think different than you and not to be each other's defense, react like two children instead of two people that can hold a conversation. And one of the ways I've learned to do that with people is to say, oh, that's an interesting perspective, because everything to me is about perspectives of truth. Every belief is just a perspective of truth, and you can have different perspectives of truth. And to me, that doesn't make things feel so defensive, and I can look at somebody else's and be open. And it allows me to act more kindly to people by doing that. And I just appreciate like what you were saying about seeing the world and the awareness that it takes. Because one of the things that I've noticed in my work, because I study people, is if we are outwardly ready to blame the outer world for our inner chaos, we are more accepting of personality types like Trump in our lives. because they are doing what we're doing. They're blaming and they're shifting blame and they're doing all this stuff. And so it makes it more comfortable because that becomes our comfort zone, is to blame the outer world.
Right.
And yeah, so it's been an interesting ride, 2020.
Yeah.
And I know, I've been posting a lot on my From a Loving Place page over the last 2 days, all about kindness and empathy and compassion and, one loving action at a time. And that's how you overcome. You're not going to do this by two defensive people reacting to each other, but to show each other respect and love and understand that we're just coming from different perspectives and we don't understand them.
Right.
One interesting thing to me is if you have been watching the maps on the big board and the reds and the blues, one thing's become very obvious, and that is that the Democratic votes are all in the urban areas and the Republican votes are all in the rural areas. And this is not surprising because the rural areas feel that they are not part of the thing, that they've been left behind. And in some ways they have been left behind in that their kids, a lot of them have grown up and left and gone to the cities. And it gives them a feeling of loss. They see their communities dwindling and these big cities are taking over the culture and all of the energy. And when you think about it that way, you can understand why they're upset. You can understand why they're angry, and you can understand why they're blaming. It doesn't excuse it, but you can understand it. And that gives you a door back in, because one of the things that they don't understand is a lot of us in these cities are dreaming about living on a farm where it's peaceful, where we have a rhythm to life that's not hectic and crazy, where we're close, where our community is there, where the doors don't need to be locked. We're not that far apart in our hopes and our dreams. But it's really difficult to cross that line.
So I want to add one little piece. It won't take very long. And it has to do with what I call defensive possibilism. And I listen to Will, and I listen, I think about trying to cross this mythical divide that's there. We're doing it by talking. And what I know is that when a person does not have embedded in their brain a story of possibility, I'm a possibilist. I've never been an optimist. I can't do it. I've had cancer 5 times. Doesn't work. But when a person does not have a story in their mind about possibility for their future, is when they become a defensive pessimist. So possibilism is a whole different thing. And you can't connect with possibilism in a person if you talk one belief to another belief. The brain, my training in neuroscience, the brain has at the very top of all the layers of the brain is where belief exists. And what happens when a new thought comes in is that belief pushes it out and it's never filed. It's like a mental bulimia. It's never metabolized. So, but the right hemisphere of the brain, that's in the left hemisphere, but the right hemisphere of the brain, instead of the fibers being vertical, the right hemisphere, they're horizontal, which means that if a person has a story or hears music or has an experience or goes to a movie, it has a chance of being digested because those fibers are horizontal. They won't get rejected because of belief. And I believe that acts of kindness and practicing them is where we can actually find a bridge that can help people have a possible future for their life. Because the people that you were talking about, Will, when you ask them about the future, it's like nothing. But when they hear a song, or when they see a movie, or when they hear a story, or when somebody leaves a chocolate bar on their front step, the belief system can't reject that. And so we have the real option for connection through the right hemisphere, through acts, through experiences, not by talking. It's not going to work. I promise you, 78 years of experience, it will not work. Unless you happen to be really magical and say, tell me about your perspective, and they tell you about their perspective and you say, that's very interesting. And then they walk away going, see, I knew I was right. You know, it's not going to happen that way. So that's all I want to say.
Linda.
This is really actually very fascinating to me based on something I was thinking about this morning. So Dawna, thank you for saying that, because I think that puts a piece in place for me. I was looking at the map, the election map this morning, and seeing that big red swath down the center of the country, and sort of seeing it as this big wound that we have in this. And I was thinking about how you heal wounds, and that when the gap is that wide, how do you can't stitch it? How do you heal it if you can't bring the pieces together to stitch it? Just reading about how you do that a little bit. And there was a process called second intention that's part of the healing process that I had never heard of before. That has to do with skin grafts and things like that. And I was like, but I don't get what that second intention is in this context. But Dawna, when you started talking about they don't even have that imagining of a possible future, all of a sudden I was thinking that's the second intention. We first have to be able to, you have to clean the wound first, but we have to be able to plant that second intention, that possibility of a different future.
Yeah.
So that's just very interesting to me, and I'll be sitting and with that and writing about that. But so thank you for that thought. That was very helpful.
Good.
Linda, thank you so much for sharing that. It's such a beautiful thing. You know, I just want to insert some gratitude here for this kind of conversation, right? Where people are just bringing in such important pieces and weaving together possibility, right? Yeah. We have about 6 minutes left, and I'm just curious, is there a direction? Rachel, I see your hand.
Well, the one thing I think is really unique and cool about life is that everybody comes in with different gifts. Some people may have this wonderful way of communicating through just different ways that they have, because of their personal experiences that have gotten them to where they are. So they have so much to offer. You know, that's how, like, these random acts of kindness brought to the world. I mean, that's a true gift to the world. And it came from a certain path. It came from a certain place. Linda, I've read her, listened to her poetry, and it's this way that it takes those defensive walls down, and there's just different ways people approach it. And it doesn't mean that other people are wrong because they approach it differently because of their unique experiences of it. And that's what I love about this journey, is when I get to see what people's gifts are, and like storytellers, some people's stories can bring you in to shift a belief because of that emotional connection you have to the story they're telling. I mean, and if it wasn't for people's stories, I wouldn't have learned that I could rewrite my own story. And that's what helped me change my beliefs. Yeah. Because I was abused by a narcissist for 10 years and then studied narcissism for the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. So it was like, to see all that, it all became a gift because of the gifts that it gave me to be able to give to other people. It's, to me, that's something that has helped me see in a way that other people don't always connect to the way I see. Mm-hmm. And I just find it all such a beautiful thing, is the gifts we all uniquely share your unique sense of listening, where you can listen so actively and respond in this way that a person feels so heard. I mean, that's a gift of kindness right there. I just love that. And it all comes out a little bit differently. And it's such a gift to the world that way. because everybody gets what they need that way when they're open to receive it, but you have to be open to receive it.
Well, and also, Rachel, what just dropped in for me, and I sent you a text to make sure you were coming because I knew you had to be here for Kindness Day, but also, like, I'm fond of saying, also people have to show up, and it's why I feel the deepest gratitude on these Wednesdays, because everyone who shows up makes such a difference. It doesn't matter what you say, if you even say anything. But your presence, your beautiful presence, and that listening and witnessing and sharing when something does come up, and I just, it's everything, I think in our society, sometimes we forget that showing up is also such a kindness.
Mhm.
I mean, if I were here by myself right now, I'd be having a totally different experience without all of you.
Yeah.
Well, and to that point, more people showed up to vote yesterday in total than ever.
Mhm.
So this is where my irrational optimism comes from. I think people are showing up. We're just trying to way through.
Oh, I love that. I love
The
that.
last paragraph in the original Random Acts of Kindness, in the introduction to the stories that came from everybody else, is where my sense of possibilism, which is Will's irrational, what'd you call it? Irrational
Optimism.
Irrational optimism. For me, it's a sense of possibilism. So I want to share with you that paragraph. I said, and it's it's as true then as it is now. It's have we moved at all since how many years? How many years ago was the first copy published?
Don't ask, Donna.
I'll look at the date here. I don't have the date. It's not printed. Yeah. Well, this edition was 1993. So you do the math on that. Anyway, it is time for all of us to risk our significance. It is our hope as contributors to this book that you will become part of the lineage, that you will be inspired by what we have breathed into these pages, and most of all, that you will practice random acts of kindness so that which came to you as seed will be passed on to the next as blossom, and that which came to you as blossom, which will go on as fruit. So those are phrases that have lived for a very long time in my mind and my heart, and have been watered and nurtured by you, Will, and by the presence of all of you here today and what you've contributed to it. And that's all I want to say.
And it's perfect, Donna, because you didn't know this, but I was going to ask you if you had some closing words for us, but there you were.
That's them.
I know that Debbie has to go, and she's the one who started our call. So I just want to, again, thank you. Thank you so much, Donna and Will, and everyone else who's here. Debbie, thank you for
I
organizing.
enjoyed meeting you all.
Yes, thank you all.
It was wonderful seeing you again, Donna.
Yes, you as
Giving it
well.
my best.
He sends you an embrace, so I will.
Thank-
He
all
says
right.
he's living in the best place in the world for you to come play golf.
I'll try and get there.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.